Everybody, and welcome. Thanks for coming. I'm Marty Woll, N6VI. I'm a member of the RATPAC Planning Group, and I'm a past ARRL Vice Director. We have candidates for the ARRL Board of Directors, some with us tonight in person, some remotely, and we'll hear from them shortly. But first, I'd like to describe briefly the League's election process and kind of recap where that process stands today. As you probably know, the the board consists of 15 directors, one from each division, and 15 vice directors. Elections are held in 5 divisions every year on a 3-year rotating cycle. This year, the 5 divisions up for election were Central, Hudson, New England, Northwestern, and Roanoke. In the Central Division, the current Vice Director, Brent Walls, N9BA, ran unopposed for director, and he was declared elected. His term will start January 1st, 2025. In the Hudson Division, John Crivelli, W2GD, is challenging incumbent Ed Wilson, N2XDD. In the New England Division, 2 challengers to incumbent Fred Kemmerer, AB10C, filed to run. Past Director Tom Frenay, K1KI, and past Director Fred Hopengarten, K1VR. Due to a disputed late filing, K1VR was declared ineligible by E&E committee, leaving this to be a 2-way race in New England. In the Northwestern Division, Idaho Section Manager and founder of this RATPAC forum, Dan Marler, K7REX, was challenging incumbent Mark Tharp, KB7HDX. After the ballots were sent out, the Ethics and Elections Committee declared K7REX disqualified for failure to retract what it considered to be false or misleading campaign statements. K7REX has appealed that decision. In the Roanoke Division, former FCC attorney Jim Tallons, N3JT, filed to run against incumbent Jim Boner, N2ZZ, but he was declared ineligible by the Ethics and Elections Committee, which asserted that he did not meet the requirements for being a member in that division, but rather in the Southeastern Division, where he has a second home. This leaves only 2 active elections in process. We invited all 4 of those candidates, 2 from each of those divisions. 2 have accepted our invitation, Tom Frenay of New England Division and John Crivelli of Hudson Division. We're giving them 5 minutes each for an opening statement, after which we'll pose a few questions to each. Now, Tom is en route, and he may or may not get here in time. He did send me his statement. So I'm going to start with Tom's statement, and then we can go from there. Since leaving the ARRL board in 2018, I have become very frustrated with the lack of progress the League is making to create a vibrant future for amateur radio. I'm asking for your vote in the current election. I care about the future of amateur radio and the leadership the ARRL should provide. In my opinion, our current New England director and the board as a whole are not adequately addressing many critical issues. Change is needed. Change means more than talking, it means actual accomplishment. Specific challenges facing ARRL in particular and amateur radio in general include shrinking ARRL membership, dissatisfaction with programs and QST, what I perceive to be governance dysfunction, not enough youth coming in, erosion of our access to spectrum, misalignment of license structure with today's needs, regulation restricting antennas, and encroachment by interference sources. My record of getting things done includes having led the ARRL effort that resulted in Rulemaking 11828, which is the technician enhancement proposal, leading a selection and vetting of 50 sites and hundreds of volunteers for the World Radio Team Championship 2014. I created and administer the very popular New England QSO Party. As a corporate IT director, I drove improved decision-making, more timely and flexible access to data through major IT modernization program. As mayor of my town, I spearheaded a successful initiative to handle challenging financial times through a creative financial structure. I have significant leadership experience, including ARRL board member for 33 years, vice president and foundation president, culminating in 2019 with election as director emeritus by the full ARRL board. I'm the former president of the Yankee Clipper Contest Club, My lifelong commitment to ARRL is exemplified first as a staff member, then through volunteering in governments, in the field organization as official relay station, Brass Pounders League, and official observer, and as a financial donor to the Maxim Society. I will listen to and work for you. Together, we will build a stronger future for amateur radio. Please contact me at frenay@pcnet.com or 860-597-4539 with any questions or suggestions. Thank you. Please support my candidacy for the ARRL board by voting today. 7-3, Tom K1KI. So that is Tom's opening statement. And so now let me turn it over to John Crivelli, W2GD. John, you'll have to unmute.
Okay. I'm sure everybody can hear me. Thank you, Marty. Hi, I'm John Crivelli, W2GD, and I'm running for director in the Hudson Division. I've never run for, I haven't run for office for a very long time in the ARRL. But I am a strong believer in the idea that our league is a representative democracy. What happens in the league happens through the directors who are responsible for creating league policy. So if you don't vote, you don't get a say. I think that's what it really comes down to. I've been a ham radio operator since 1961 when I got my Lambus ticket. And I've been a extra class licensee for the better part of 60 years. I live in New Jersey, in Flemington, New Jersey. Been here, and I've been a lifelong resident of the Hudson Division. Now, some people probably ask, well, why are you running for director? Well, first of all, our division has not had an election, a balloted election, in 6 years. The last one was in 2018. My opponent, Ed Wilson, N2XDD, has the post. He is the incumbent by virtue of a series of appointments. He was appointed vice director when W2UDT passed away, and he became director when the most recent director, NP4H, resigned. He's never faced the voters, so I thought this was an opportune time that, well, let's let the members decide who should be their director through a contested election. Now, contested elections, as you can see, in Central, they appointed, or by acclamation, essentially, the Central director was returned to his seat. And in the case of Roanoke, because Jim Tallons and N3JT was disqualified, into Zed acceded to the seat again. I think elections are important. I can't impress too heavily that everybody should take that ballot and vote. This is your opportunity to be a part of ARRL governance. And in fact, it is really the only opportunity you have to directly influence what happens. One of the things that's bothered me about the ARRL for a very long time is the lack of transparency. Members are not kept informed. That's, I think, a reasonable statement. At least it's my opinion. When things are about to happen, we're very often we hear about it after the fact. Let's take, for instance, the dues increase. No one on this Zoom call knew about that. Knew that was going to happen until after it did. There was no pre-communication. Directors We're not given an opportunity to consult with the membership. We've all found out at the same time. I think that's probably the most significant example of what it means not to be transparent. Members should know. Members should be consulted. Members should have the opportunity to express their opinions. As a director in a membership nonprofit organization, the director is responsible to the members who voted him in. And they're the only ones who can remove a director. So it's incumbent upon candidates to take that very seriously and be the eyes and ears for their members and express their feelings and their expectations. Probably the other reason I really want to be director is because I want to make sure the ARRL remains a membership organization. There's a lot of rumor that it may change. There are certainly several, forms of governments that can be chosen. We happen to have a representative democracy of elected officials now, but it doesn't have to be. The board can make the decision to change that. I want to be a part of that discussion. The ARRL has to survive. It's the only organization in the United States that has our back when it comes to frequency allocations, governance or interfacing with government entities such as the FCC, the ITU, and our U.S. Congress. There have been numerous situations where it has been the ARRL who's leading the charge, and that can't change. That has to remain. I'm hoping that through the rest of our lifetimes we have an ARRL, but nothing in life is assured. I've talked about having a contested election. I've talked about transparency. Let me talk a little about my experience in leadership. I'm a former assistant director. I'm a former section manager. I'm an ORS appointee. I took part in the 1998 ARRL Presidential Committee to come up with the policy for codeless licensing. I've been a representative, our Hudson Division representative on the Contest Advisory Committee. I am three-time president of the Frankfurt Radio Club, former president of the Cherryville Repeater Association. Yes, I do contesting. Yes, I do DXing. And hold numerous contesting records. And I've been on some very interesting DXpeditions that many of you, I'm sure, have worked if you're HF type guys. Not the least of which was recently CY0S, and in the recent past, K1N and K5D. I'm trying to make sure I don't forget anything. Oh, did I say I was a life member? Well, I've been a life member for over 60 years. We're very close to it. I think that $150 investment is paid off. I'm former publisher and editor of the National Contest Journal prior to it being taken over by the ARRL. I'm an inductee into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. I've been a six-time Radio Sport Team Championship competitor. I'm a founding member of the CW Ops Club and a member of the First Class Operators Club. From a business standpoint, I spent 25 years in management consulting. And after that, I had a 22-year career in antenna consulting and antenna and tower construction for ham radio operators in North America, South America, Central America, Africa. We're all getting a little older, and I have retired. One final thing, I guess, I should remember. I'm currently vice president of the Frankfurt Radio Club and president emeritus. As you can see from that litany of things I've just read off here, I have a lifetime of volunteerism, and I've been involved in amateur radio since I was 11. You can tell by some of the numbers that I'm north of 70. There's nothing wrong with that. 70 is the new 50, I guess. At least I like to think so. I like to think it's my opportunity now to give back. That's why I'm running for director. Marty, take it away, buddy.
All right, John, thank you very much. John mentioned the importance of voting. Let me just make an observation. I started kind of tracking this when I ran for vice director back in 2007. And that is that it seems to be pretty much a pattern that in any given division election, only around a third at the most of the eligible voters actually cast ballots. I would hope that more members of the league, and these are amateurs who've already recognized that it's important to join the league, would also realize that it's important to cast your votes and to pay attention to what's going on in the elections and take part in them. So thank you for that reminder, John.
Thank you.
Okay, now we've prepared a few questions in advance. I wanted our presenters to give a thoughtful, give it some consideration before answering. So we let them see a few questions that I have, and then in order to get the greatest number of questions in the least amount of time, we'd like you, if you have questions, to please put them into chat. Precede your text with a capital Q so we know it's a question, and indicate whether it's for Tom or John or both. Now, Tom may or may not be available to answer, but we'll take your questions and pose them to whoever is here. Our moderators will collate and post your questions, but let's start with a couple of these. One issue still getting attention, as some have mentioned, is the combination of dues increase and cessation of receiving printed QST as an included member benefit. Do you agree with these actions, and would you have liked to see them handled differently? John, you can respond first.
Thank you, Marty. I'm not sure how I would vote on this because I'm not in possession of the relevant information. What were the assumptions made? How were they applied to the projections that inevitably came out of those assumptions? I don't have enough information. It's one of the things I would hope would find out if I'm elected and share that with the membership. They have a right to know, especially in the light that it was sprung on them as overnight with no preamble. There was no warning. Maybe I want to actually double check some of those calculations. Maybe I want to say, okay, maybe I had a little bit of, Missouri DNA in me. I don't necessarily trust other people's work. And then through 20 some odd years of consulting, that attitude has paid off. Again, I think the members were it was a big disservice to the members by not letting them know ahead of time, and especially by cutting off QST in the middle of subscription periods. That I think was unreasonable borderline unethical, my opinion. I was very dismayed in the it was at the last board meeting, I believe, where an attempt was made to make that right, and it got voted down. Maybe another attempt should be made to change that. I think that's probably about it.
Okay, thank you, John. I have Tom's response to that. He says, I do not agree that this was the right action. I do, however, agree with one of the underlying premises that caused this to happen. The league needs to operate in the black. But for two reasons, I would not have voted my support for this action. First, I believe this action was purely financial. It took steps to resolve league financial challenges entirely at the expense of the membership value proposition. It made us all losers. It could have been so much better if some innovation and creativity had been brought to the table. Second, even the action as it was designed was faulty, as I see it. Prepaid multi-year members were cheated out of printed QST in later years, and this was done by design. Finally, we should note that it was my opponent, AB10C, who spearheaded this restructuring. He commanded a small group of inside players, ignored the true messages coming out of the league's survey, pushed it through the board review, and got the results we see today, which is effectively are an angry and shrinking membership. Let's go to the next question. 6 years ago, there were a number of proposed bylaw amendments considered to be substantive by many, and they were proposed in the boardroom without advance notice to the members. Those amendments were leaked. The members responded in opposition, and that opposition was significant. And those amendments were eventually withdrawn. After that incident, management agreed to provide members with advance notice of such governance proposals going forward. But that appears not to have happened based on a similar incident last January. What process would you advocate for future proposed governance changes? John, why don't you take it?
Thank you, Marty. This question again points out the seriousness of the transparency issue. Members aren't being told what their leaders are about to do. Now, I was a part of that event in 2018, as were literally thousands of other members across the country. And it was leaked. And if it had not been leaked, the result could have been very, very different. We were fortunate enough to see line by line what they intended to do in a marked up copy of the motions and the changes to the bylaws. Once that was revealed to the general membership, there was no stopping the opposition. On January 1st, 2018, I was amongst about a dozen other people, and we formed an organization called My ARRL Voice. Every one of its members are life members, or more, or less. It's every one of us is committed to the survival of the ARRL and strong supporters of the ARRL through our whole lifetimes. There was 500 years of experience in this group with ARRL. We saw what was happening. We took actions to organize people to oppose those actions, and we were very fortunate to have been successful. But what came out of that was a commitment by the president at the time, K5UR, to not let us be surprised again. We were supposed to receive, as I recall, at least 30 days notice of bylaw changes that would change the governance of the ARRL. I think somewhere in the course of history here that has been lost, because it was brought up again in January of this year when there was an attempt to pass bylaw 46. which many people saw as being flawed, including myself. Again, there was opposition. Again, the bylaw suggested was withdrawn. Members have a voice. Sometimes they have to raise that voice in different ways. I think the procedure should be written. I think there should be a procedure, Marty, that ensures members are notified previous to major changes in governance. Right now, there is no such thing. The board can meet and make pretty much any changes they want if they have the votes. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We posed the same question to Tom, K1KI.
Wait a minute, Marty, may I make one other point?
Please go ahead.
Okay. I mentioned the My ARRL voice. People don't realize there is a Facebook group called My ARRL Voice. It is not in any way directly connected to myarrlvoice.org. Like anything else on their internet, My ARRL Voice on Facebook is a rumble and tumble kind of place. It's an open forum. People can say whatever they want, and it is not the opinion of ARRL.org. So I want to make that clear distinction, because there has been a lot of criticism what goes on that Facebook page. People are pretty free with their comments and their opinions. There are some good stuff and there's some very bad stuff. It's impossible to police. Now I'm a moderator, one of several, and we try, but it's impossible to control people. Impossible. But we do what we can. Thanks, Marty.
Thanks. Well, that's one of the reasons I stay off social media. As
Very
I say, we also posed this question to Tom, and he said, like so many other board processes, the modification of association constitution and bylaws is at the same time antiquated and poorly managed, in my opinion. I advocate for governance reform that would bring ARRL into the 21st century in terms of governance processes and engagement of the full membership. Okay, thank you. Now, a couple more questions and then we'll go to the audience here. The malicious hacking of the ARRL computer system last May has caused significant disruption and a lot of extra work for headquarters management and employees. It should be noted that the hackers were a highly sophisticated criminal enterprise, and even after receiving a negotiated ransom, which by the way was covered by the insurance, the recovery keys were incomplete and some data appears to have been permanently lost. What steps would you as a director call to be taken to minimize such risks in the future? John, have at it.
Marty, well, yes, it was a tragedy what happened here. It was probably made worse by not having maybe a CTO. In years past, there was a CTO position. I don't know if it was ever filled or not, but certainly we don't have one now. I think there have been 3 or 4 IT managers over the last 4 or 5 years. So there hasn't been a lot of consistency or potentially consistency in terms of how things are run. Whatever action plan might have been in place, if there was one, I don't know if there was one. I suspect maybe not. Contingency plan. It was good that the league had appropriate liability insurance for this kind of thing. And I'm glad they brought in law enforcement and skilled negotiators to make it happen. Now, one of the things that isn't working, I think it's been made public, is the accounting system. And they're struggling or I don't know if they're struggling, but they are working very hard to try to recreate the accounting system, which has slowed down the production of annual reports, filings, etc. And it's understandable. It's an unfortunate thing. One thing that might be considered is looking at more potential outsourcing of our services. IT is not a core competency of the ARRL. It's a necessity to get things done. And some things have to be more bulletproof than others. And sometimes people with more expertise should be the ones putting them together. That's not to say that members who are skilled in the IT world shouldn't take a part in this. In fact, I think they should, because they're subject matter experts. They can help the hired guns to get it done, and maybe quickly, and maybe even less expensively. We don't know that. Part of my consulting career was working on problems like this and researching them and coming up with numbers that say, okay, this is what you should do, and this you shouldn't. I think that's in a direction that maybe the board should be considering. That's about all.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, we pose the same question to Tom K1KI. He points out it's not possible to entirely prevent this kind of attack as the league sustained on its IT infrastructure, but it is possible to reduce the likelihood and impact of such an event. It takes careful planning, additional investment, and a high level of expertise, none of which I see are in place to date. The most important missing ingredient was an awareness of the enormity of the threat and commitment to address it proactively. In the aftermath of the recent event, there is a raised awareness now and some activity aimed at preventing this in the future. However, I'm not convinced that the new team is qualified, resourced, and underwritten to be able to solve the problem in a manner that fits into the larger set of strategic objectives. It appears to me that the reaction to treat this as a purely technical problem is not correct. It is a major business impacting problem, and the team addressing it should be structured in a manner that recognizes this. Note that for much of the last 3 years, there was no IT director working for ARRL. This suggests to me that management and the board were not focused on the key issues. Final question from here. Connecticut law requires the following of directors of nonprofit corporations. It says a director shall discharge his duties as a director, including his duties as a member of a committee, in good faith, with care that an ordinary prudent person in a like position would exercise under similar circumstances, and in a manner he or she reasonably believes to be in the best interest of the corporation. Access to internal financial operating information is widely considered an important tool for directors exercising their responsibility under the Connecticut statutes. So here's a two-part question. First, do you believe there's some internal financial or operating information that can or should be withheld from directors? Second, excluding matters involving personnel, proposed business acquisitions, and pending or threatened litigation, what kinds of information, if any, do you believe should not be shared with the members? John, the floor is yours.
I want to go back, Marty. You read something that said in maybe I'm paraphrasing this, in a manner he reasonably believes to be in the best interests of the corporation. Now that's a statement that sort of tells you, you should be worried about the corporation first. But we're not a normal nonprofit organization. We are a membership nonprofit organization. Directors are accountable to their constituents, the members in their division. Not, and that's their first priority. The second priority is the corporation as a whole. I think that distinction is lost quite often. Even, if I were to be elected, my allegiance isn't to the organization first. It is to the members first. Now, I don't think there's any information, financial information, other than possibly HR related things, that should be withheld from the directors. They're smart guys. They can analyze data. They can understand what's being told to them. I think it's important that data not be withheld, because as a director, You're in charge with setting policy, and you're also charged with fiduciary responsibility. You can't make decisions, at least not reasonable and accurate decisions, if you don't have the information. To this day, I think the members are puzzled. Why did we have a rate increase? Why did they take away QST for a lot of us? That's and there's never been anyone who has supplied an answer, a rational answer to that with numbers. I hope that happens sometime in the future. Directors have, anyway, if you also dig into nonprofit membership organization law in Connecticut, you can walk away and say, well, a director really should be able to see any piece of paper in the building. Well, as a practical matter, probably not. But certainly financial information, whether it be about any kind of expenditure transaction, should be fair game. If you want to research, what are we paying for legal assistance? What are we paying for paper products? I mean, whatever it is, that should be at the discretion of the director to ask, and he should be answered. There should be no precursor to the request, in my opinion. I think, did you ask the question about personnel matters?
What we said was we exclude personnel matters and
Okay.
litigation and so on.
Okay. Well, in general, of course, I agree. HR information, HR case situations are off limits to the members. It's private. It should be kept. It's just like any other normal business. You're not going to hear about this stuff. Yeah, no, I don't really have a right to it. But when things become public knowledge, when say we're sued or we're suing someone else and it becomes public knowledge, then there is a right because it impacts the health of the ARRL. Members can ask those things. It can be embarrassing sometimes, probably, but they have a right. So if sued and it becomes public, yeah, there's no reason that information shouldn't be provided. I think I answered the question.
Thank you very much. Yes. We asked the same question from Tom. Tom says directors should have access to the information they need to deliver on their obligations to the company. This includes up-to-date financials. Such information should be handled under well-understood confidentiality policies. I believe board deliberations should be conducted in private. While there are rare exceptions, this is very much the norm for both profit and nonprofit organizations. Exploratory and open board discussions should not be the subject to and effectively muted or dampened by the inherent risk of public broadcast. Implementation of stream board meetings will create stiff structure meetings and push the real discussions further into the shadows. This does not mean I don't support transparency. Members should be given honestly reported visibility into board discussions through minutes and executive reports following every board meeting.
Marty, may I make a comment about that?
Yes.
I know Tom's not here, but I don't think he'll mind. The secrecy surrounding board meetings, I think, is a huge issue. It breeds distrust amongst the members. They feel that some secret stuff is going on. I've been told this God knows how many times. I believe in broadcasting those meetings, opening them up. And this is not unheard of in other organizations at all, nonprofits in particular. It is not a cost prohibitive event. Adding it is very well within the means of the ARRL. And I don't agree with the notion that because our representatives are being watched and our management is being watched, that it's going to stifle anything. It shouldn't. If you believe what you say, you shouldn't worry about who hears it. Good.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for addressing these questions. Let's turn it over to our members. Barry, you have some questions from the members.
Lots of them. First one, how would you as a director help save vulnerable spectrum such as 900 megahertz?
As a director,
Mm-hmm.
I would support the efforts of the staff to do what they have to do to make that happen. Directors don't get their hands dirty actually doing the work. They set policy. Obviously, the policy of the American Radio Relay League now and probably forever will be to do what we can to keep spectrum in our hands or to add more spectrum, which has actually happened in years gone by. But certainly we're in a conservation mode today. People want to buy our spectrum. So as a director, I support whatever staff programs are implemented to make that happen.
Thanks, John. When this question came up a few years ago, I kind of took a look at recent FCC auctions, and if you just extrapolated our amateur allocations to the spectrum being auctioned in terms of assessing its value, our spectrum basically, if sold, might pay for as much as 3% of the national debt.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's huge. So
that is huge.
There's the pressure for you. And by the way, ARRL does have a dedicated FCC counsel. And that, in fact, he happens to be a former FCC attorney.
K3ZJ.
Yes, yes. And he provides both advice to the directors, real time, not just at board meetings, but real time, and also takes direction from the board and management in terms of how to respond to these things. That also doesn't preclude members from filing good, informative responses. I've seen some excellent responses coming from the membership and some of our league volunteers on some of these recent proposals. So good point there. All right, Barry, back to you.
This one is going to be an interesting one. Why should we remain as members when ARRL management can, by fiat, simply disqualify candidates when they don't like or like hearing from?
I'm going to assume that was a question that was spawned by the recent actions of the E&E committee. Am I right?
I would believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to defend the E&E committee. They can do that themselves. I'm sitting here tonight wary of what I say because they can use what I say against me during the campaign period that started on July 1st. So I'm a little bit constrained. As long as I use factual information or clearly say it's an opinion, I'm in pretty good, I'm pretty solid ground. But the question is, obviously people are upset with the most recent decisions. There's nothing to hide there. And the clarity of those decisions is lacking. We really don't have a clear understanding of why K1VR, N3JT, K7REX were all disqualified. It is unfortunate. I would, my own preference, my personal preference is let the voters decide. Marty.
Thanks. And I will mention too that eventually any of the actions by the E&E can be made public by the folks affected. So you'll find out more or less. But the original question was, why should I remain a member of the league when this happens? Well, my answer is if you leave the league, you lose a voice completely.
You can't vote.
And the league loses the support it needs to do the critical jobs. The fact that you may disagree with the decisions either from management or E&E or the board, doesn't mean you give up and walk away. We have never, and John and I were both involved in founding My RL Voice. We never ever encourage people to leave the league. That membership that's still your link, and it's still our league. So please, don't let that discourage you from continuing your membership. Barry?
And there was a motion passed, I believe, if not in January, the previous June meeting, where they were going to remove the E&E function from the board and an independent third-party group to vet all of the people that were running for offices for the directors, and also with some of the ethical violations that were happening. They wanted to take that out of the board's purview and give it to an independent third party. Because of what happened.
I actually support that completely.
Right.
Now, it doesn't have to be, the third party is the question. Who is the third party?
That's up to the board. I assume there are.
Well, they were supposed to have a committee to do that and look into it. I don't think they've reported on it.
That's correct.
Okay. But should it be ex-directors, ex-officers, members at large? I mean, that whole question, who should it be? Certainly it would be to our benefit as members that it's a group that is part of our culture, not some lawyer someplace.
Right.
Okay. And that's the alternative.
It's me.
All right. Thank you, John. And yes, we have, I know that question has been raised, but it has, I think it's still under study. Barry, another question?
Sure. Would you support the current emergency management professional at headquarters?
Sorry, could you say that again?
I heard him. Should I support the current emergency management person at headquarters? I don't know enough about him. I can't venture opinion. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's see what's going on here.
Barry, anything else?
Looking, how does one or anyone affect the massive change implied by the current discussion without creating equally massive divisiveness?
For a while now, there has been a very obvious split. At least it's obvious to me, of members on the board who believe in different kinds of governance. You have those in the transparency group who believe in openness, who want to see the open meetings, who want to inform members prior to when things happen, get their opinions, what's on their minds. And there's the other side, I guess sometimes referred to as the secrecy group. That's not very becoming, I'm sure, but
I think they call it the confidentiality group.
Oh, okay, confidential. That's a little easier. Who apparently are not terribly concerned, at least by their actions, about members being actively involved in governance. I don't think the only way that can change is through elections. We do five directors each year. So over a period of 3 years, everybody gets turned over, or could be turned over, depending on how many incumbents are reelected. There has been a dearth of people running for office. It's hard to find people to volunteer to be an officer. It's difficult to find people who want to be section managers. It's difficult to find people who want to run emergency management in the field organizations. It's just simply hard to get volunteers. So when somebody does step up, they're gonna take they're gonna shoulder some risk, and they're gonna be questioned, just like you're questioning me this evening. And if Tom were here, I'm certainly respond to every one of these just fine. He's got 4 decades or more of involvement in ARRL. And I'm not happy with the divisiveness that's here. It's almost like our country And I'd like to see a change. I like this to find ways to work together better than it's working right now. I think in January of last year, they passed a rule to change the roll call vote requirements. It used to be that, forever until this rule's changed, a single director could ask for a roll call. Seems reasonable. But now you have to have 5 directors agree for a roll call. To me, that, and given the current structure of membership in the board, that becomes very difficult because of different governance philosophies. Anyway, I don't really have a really great answer for you. I think it's just like society. How do we bring our country together? It's hard.
One of the incumbents suggested, and I don't know anything internally about this, that the board will be going to some sort of electronic voting, in which case all votes would be recorded automatically. And I would presume, or hope at least, that in addition to recording them automatically, they would be reported on a consistent basis in the minutes. That should at least address the roll call vote question. Barry, anything else?
We have lots of other things. Do you believe, with certain obvious exceptions, that the board meetings should be live streamed to the membership?
I answered that before. Yes.
John answered that, and so did Tom. So let's move on from there.
Okay. So the directors have the power to eliminate any opposing candidate they believe that they deem what they say is if they deem what they say is incorrect. That's the question, and I believe they do.
There's a standard of truthfulness. It is not well documented, but it is the preview of the elections and ethics and elections committee to rule on what they consider to be the standard of truthfulness. It's quite clear that a lot of people disagree what that may be in any particular situation. This is the way it's working today. I will say, I've filed E&E complaints, generally without success, but we don't have another system right now to do this. That's why the earlier discussion of the question was, should this function be removed? I mean, we have 3 sitting directors appointed by the president who are responsible for this function. They change over every year. So is there potential for bias? You be the judge. Next question.
Okay, well, there was a question about who was on the E&E committee, and that's Director Baker, N4MB, Director Yonley, N8SY, and Director Ryan, K0RM. And Director Baker is the chairman.
That's correct.
And the committee members are reappointed each year based on who is sitting in the 15 seats. So that committee makeup can change. And one of the rules is no one can sit on that committee who, of course, is in a division that is up for election that year. So, you can't have somebody running for office and also sitting on that committee. It has to be somebody in one of the other 10 divisions.
And they're appointed by the president.
And they are all appointed by the president, as are all the committee members, standing committee members, and committee chairs.
All right. Okay. Steve KJ7YL says he is paying more for less. Like my cable company, I got tired of them, and I am sure the league will start feeling the same way. So I dump the cable. Should I dump the ARRL?
Well, I think we've answered that.
Yeah. The answer is no. The answer is no.
Yeah. How about Ria's question there?
I'm getting down to that right now. The Ria's question: what do you see as the role of the field organization, particularly section managers, in the future? being a former SCM, you certainly have experience in this area. How would you set policy with regard to the field organization?
First of all, I think the field organization is running just fine. I think election of section managers should continue. I think they should be independent and function independently with minimal amount of oversight. They don't report to anybody. They are our field organization, and they are a jewel in our total scope of the ARRL. We have thousands of volunteers. They like what they do. They do it because they want to do it, not because they have to. So I wouldn't change it at all.
Very good. Very good. And yes, I would agree that having seen, trying to get section managers, the section emergency coordinators, those can be really tough positions to fill. We've been fortunate to have some very well qualified people step up and take it on. Most of them are people who don't need anything else to do in their lives. They've got plenty already, but they do it anyway. And we have to be very grateful for them and support them, and not treat them like employees. They're not employees. They're representatives of their sections, and have the responsibility to carry out the league's programs at the local level, and they need that local knowledge to be able to do that effectively.
Well, there is a reason why that question is being asked by RIA. There is a rumor going around that the board is going to be voting on eliminating the section manager position. There's a committee that's actually looking into that.
Okay, I haven't heard anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
John, have you?
I have not heard anything about that either.
Right.
I'd be very upset about it if it came up for a vote.
Okay. So let's see, where are we here? This is probably more for Dan than anyone else here. Can the RATPAC group talk about why the other candidates chose not to participate? I know Dan has been attempting to contact all of them, and this is what we got. And Tom, if he wasn't on the road, would have been here. But none of the other candidates agreed to come on. And Dan might want to be able to speak to that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, let me just say, we can't know why somebody does something. All we can do is observe. And Dan did make both email and attempt to make telephone contact with the other candidates, and they did not respond. So I don't think we can really, infer any motivation one way or the other. We don't know if they're available. We don't know if headquarters would prefer that they not participate. We have no idea.
Okay. Here's another question. What are some of the ideas to help promote the hobby and recruit young and 30+ people to the hobby?
To me, young and 30+ are the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, for a lot of us. I'm currently involved with maybe granting some money to encourage college students to do certain amateur radio projects. And I think STEM and young engineers particularly are fertile ground for recruitment for us. And as Marty said, okay, younger is relative. We certainly, I'm sure, seeing growth in the 30 to 55 group when they become more settled in their families and their environments, and they have more time, and something may trigger their interest. There's certainly a proliferation of information about amateur radio on the internet. So if somebody is so inclined, it's not like the old days where you'd have to go find a book or find somebody locally who does this, But the times have changed. We are instantly have access to just about all kinds of all information. The programs that we have to have staff people too who are smart about this, and this is their job to come up with ideas about this. Clearly the policy of the league is to expand its membership. That'll never change. And in fact, I think we're down to about 130,000, something like that. And certainly numbers count, especially with government. We can't really drop too low, or our voice won't be listened to. So it is a critical issue.
I'd like to mention that, since back when I was first on the board in 2008, um, the league has sponsored a Teachers Institute every year where they bring a combination of high school, grade school, college instructors uh, into training sessions that last a week. There's now an advanced one too that's another week, and it's funded by donations specific to Teachers Institute, and all their expenses are paid for this when they're selected, and they're taught various ways to incorporate technology in general and amateur radio in particular into their curriculum. I've seen some real successes of that from a grade school out in the Inland Empire of Southern California, where they ended up with a space shuttle contact that just drove everybody crazy. They loved it. And they ended up with a station there at their grade school with the help of volunteers maintaining it. To a college professor over on the West Coast here in engineering who provides projects that require you to get an amateur radio license to be able to do the project because it involves transmitting on our bands. And I know my wife, who's an official relay station, transmits a lot, conveys a lot of welcome to ham radio messages to kids who are in that program and have gotten their license. The other question is, once they get their license, how many of them stay active? Is it just for the class, or is it something that they continue? And that's probably, I think, where clubs come in, because to me, being in regular contact with other people who are enthusiastic for the various aspects of our hobby is probably one of the best ways to maintain the enthusiasm yourself. I know it was for me.
I grew up in a one-horse town. Ham radio was my periscope to the rest of the world. I still feel that way.
And a lot of people started their careers when they were in junior high school or high school by being hams, and they went on to become people in the radio field. A lot of people.
Yeah, I think we see that less today than we used to, but it still is a good opportunity. And, I'm not into the college admission process anymore, but I know that they were, at least when I was involved, they were looking for people with some varied activities and, interests and dedication to something. And I've heard from various folks over the years where it was their amateur radio license that kind of pushed them over the top in getting in. And the same thing when they were interviewing for jobs, particularly technical jobs. The fact that they had that curiosity and how it works and how to build it and how to make it operate and how to troubleshoot and so on. Those things that you don't necessarily learn in a formal education can be invaluable to an employer. So, we know that's true. Now, how do we get that message out to the students and the employees of tomorrow?
You don't say plastics now. You say RF engineer.
Well, I go to PTA meetings, and I participated in JOTA a couple of years, talking to parents. And you mentioned scholarships. There are ham radio scholarships for licensed amateur radio people. There's also a chance to pad their resumes by participating in the field organization as part of the ARRL. You put that on your resume when you're applying to colleges or applying to jobs. And that can be something that we could tap into if we could.
Yeah, very good. And by the way, those scholarships, there are a lot, I know there are scholarships managed by other organizations, but the ARRL Foundation is, among other things, the administrator of many scholarships from families, from hams who want to give back. And if you have the means, either individually or maybe getting together with club members to fund a scholarship that will give encouragement and some support to active hams in your area who are about college age, that's one way. And again, it's not for everybody because it does take some resources, some financial resources, but that's another way that you can encourage that sort of thing among student age population.
Mhm. Okay, one of the other questions was, is ARRL membership a requirement for participating in RATPAC?
Oh, not
Absolutely
at
not.
all.
Absolutely not. It's open to anybody with an interest in radio. You're encouraged to have an amateur radio license, but you don't have to be, and it's open to everybody. We aren't restricted like that. It was the
Yeah.
reason why we founded this was at the time in COVID, there was a desperate need for stuff to be done, which wasn't being done by headquarters. So Dan and a couple of other people got together and we started this group. Let's
Very
go
good.
on. Okay. How do we affect change with the league, with the current ARRL board members? Wouldn't it just be more of the same?
You vote in new members who are agreeable to your interests.
Absolutely.
That's the only way it's going to change.
Yeah. And I would say too, keep yourself informed on what's going on in the league. The board minutes come out every 6 months. Read them. It may not be everything you want to find out, but it's a start. Find out where your director may be conducting some outreach at a club meeting or at a convention. Go and talk to them. Listen to what they have to say. Ask questions and talk to your fellow members.
And also let your section managers know.
Yeah. Now, again, the section managers are not involved at all in policy, but they probably hear a lot of stuff. And again, they're the ones responsible for turning these policies into action on the ground. So absolutely, and get involved with your section if you can. They, as John said earlier, they're desperate for volunteers. People who will put in some effort. And yes, you end up giving the work to the people who are already the busiest, but those are often the ones who can do things effectively. They're good at multitasking. They have a lot of experience that they can bring to the table. Managing volunteers is a tough job. I can tell you from my community and other areas. So to find good ones and support them is a challenge, but it's also probably the best way to get good results.
I think directors really have an obligation to reach out to the members to understand what they want, how they feel, what do they think, what are their suggestions. Oh my God, suggestions from the members? Come on. What a concept. As a director, I think I'm thinking about this now that I should have some kind of a council, a division council. Those assistant directors I think are still out there. Yeah. And that in 20 years ago when I was an assistant director, we had an annual or a semi-annual meeting where we all got around and to discuss what was going on and what should happen, what should be done. I think there has to be more member involvement.
Yeah. I know our Southwestern Division director, N6AA, whenever we have a convention or a hamfest, he'll try and get with, he'll start by, if he can, get the leadership together from the sections that are involved and have a general discussion and try to make sure everybody knows where everybody else is and what they're doing. And then, of course, being open to member questions. When I was vice director, I did an awful lot of club meetings, mostly in person, and it gave me a pretty good feel for what different clubs were going through, the ones that were growing, the ones that were, seemed to be kind of shriveling away. And so we could try and, make some suggestions that would improve the clubs, and by that, improving the amateur radio overall and the membership. But yeah, outreach is critical. And I think most directors, do provide opportunities. But if you want to talk to your director, if you have a question, don't wait for them to come to you. You go to them.
There was in the director's job description, there was a requirement to have a division cabinet meeting at least twice a year. It's the assistant directors, the section managers. Some division directors do, and they've been chastised for the directors that don't have it at board meetings. A lot of directors don't. In the now that 4 years, my division director has never had a division cabinet meeting. So he doesn't hear from the directors. the members, because we hear from the members and we usually pass that on to the director. So it's something that should be an absolute positive requirement for the directors. But we're running late. Okay, so another question from YouTube. Where were John and Tom's opponents? What excuses did they give for not participating tonight? We tried.
We answered that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. He could not find and did not hear reason why the FCC came up with $35 fee for licensing renewal. To me, this was the FCC shooting its own foot, squashing much incentive to become a ham. How would you start the ball rolling to eliminate or reduce the cost?
You know, most of the hams I know, except for the brand new ones, spend enough on equipment and stations and travel and so on that $35 as opposed to the $10 it used to be is really kind of in the noise level. I mean, remember, this is basically a penny a day, and for the privileges that we have with our license, it's not great. Now, the rationale for the FCC to do any of this is that they are required by law to charge fees that cover their costs. Now, how you define their costs, I don't know. There may be different, overhead allocations and so on. But the basic premise for them, and this is by law, if they're going to charge a fee, they have to show that it basically is to cover their costs of doing the processing.
One more.
They were forced to do it.
Mm-hmm. By law, by
the Congress.
Right. So, one more question: how bad would things have to be? How bad would things have to get at the league before you might consider other options to an organization? Many people I hear from say that there are no options, and that's the only reason they continue to be ARRL members. I think ARRL needs to reorganize its own organization because it's from the 40s and it hasn't been updated since then. But let's see what everyone else has to say.
It's a tough hypothetical.
Yes.
We're not there. I don't think we're there. Anyway, actually, I don't think we're anywhere close to being in that existential threat mode. The league has money that it can spend if it chooses to. I think it's quite obvious that we're losing members because of various things that have happened. Unfortunately, it's you make there's nobody else doing some of those things that we depend on the league for, particularly spectrum items.
Yeah.
Spectrum conservation.
The FCC, when there are issues out there that may affect amateur radio, proposals, they will usually wait to issue any sort of decision until they've heard from the league, because they know the league represents maybe not a majority of amateurs, but an awful lot of the active amateurs. People that get their license and shove it in the drawer tend not to become members of ARRL. It's the ones that actually are getting on the air, trying new things, building their skills. Those are the ones that join the league.
There's some very, very smart. Well, I'm going to just say one thing. Marketing the league is something that we have enough members who have professional marketing skills that we should employ their ideas. I don't know if it's really been, we haven't made that outreach. At least I don't think we have, to find those people to come up with a viable plan, one that really may have an impact.
And I remember as a vice director, I was looking at some material that they were putting together to send to new licensees, and it's kind of hey, here's some material that you may help you in picking your first amateur radio station, and it was all about HF, and I said about building an HF station, and I said, most of the new ones folks are techs. They're not going to build that. Why are you misdirecting this information? And I don't know if they ever corrected it, but I think you have to be a little more heads up about who your audience is when you're doing marketing.
And maybe there are more than one plan based upon who the licensee is.
Yeah. So listen, I think we've run our time aplenty, but we had some good questions. John, we thank you very much for your presence and your participation, and letting everybody know where you stand. I think that's really important in any election. We thank Tom for sending in his responses to some of those questions, and again, it's so important that if there's an election in your division, please look at the candidate, study the issues, and vote. I would love to see voter participation going up north of 50%. And if anybody asks how to improve the league, to me, getting that voter participation up is probably one of the key ways to do it.
And if everybody on here and every ARRL member got just one new ARRL member to join, we would double our membership instantly. We need to push that.
Yep.
ARRL is, as a lot of you know, a lot more than QST.
Absolutely.
It really is a whole organization out there to help the members.
Yep.
And contact your directors, your vice directors, your section managers. We're all here to listen to the members and give input to try to get things done.
Absolutely. Dan, why don't you go ahead and give a brief summary of what's happened with you and where people can find more information?
It might be easier if you ran through a briefing on all three of them, including me, but that might be faster.
Okay. So let me just summarize as best I know. First, in the case of K1VR, Fred was running for the New England position. That's still a competitive race, but it was going to be a three-way. Fred submitted his petition before the filing deadline. Unfortunately, the attachment was missing or omitted, the attachment that has the actual signatures of the nominating members. And he was notified about that missing attachment, as I understand, only minutes before the actual deadline. And he didn't get that notice until after the deadline had passed. And they said, well, since it was incomplete, you're not considered eligible to run. So that's the New England situation. In the case of Jim Tallons, Jim is a retired FCC attorney. His home is in Virginia. His station is in Virginia. His cars are registered in Virginia, which is part of the Roanoke Division, which is where he applied to become a candidate for director. Jim happens to have a second home in Florida, and he is legally a resident of both states. But again, his station, his license, everything are in Virginia. One of the issues that E&E brought up was that he's registered to vote in Florida. Well, I mean, you register to vote based on where where you're going to be when the elections come around, which is typically November, and that happens to be a time he's usually at his second home. Also, because he moves from one area to the other, he changes his he asked the league to change his QST mailing address. Last time they changed it to Florida, when he went back to Virginia, they did not change it back in terms of his membership record. And therefore, they concluded that even though he was in Virginia and living in Virginia at the time he filed the application, they said, well, you're not a resident, you're not a member of the division, you're a member of another division, and therefore you're not eligible. So that was the explanation, if you will, for that one. In the case of Dan, he'd gotten through, going through changing some things on his ballot statement to make E&E happy. The statement was approved. The ballots went out. The results started coming in. And Dan sent out an email as a way to outreach a number of his constituents to explain some of the issues and why he would be a good choice for them to vote. E&E saw this, and they came back and challenged many of his statements, saying these are not factual, these are misleading or false. I will tell you, I was part of the group that looked at that with Dan, and we saw virtually everything was factual or supported, and the E&E required that he recuse, or rather that he retract these items. And we said, well, why are we retracting things that are true? We saw this happen 6 years ago in the Central Division race. Val K9VL or N9VL had cited a number of issues in connection with her opponent's voting record. And Ethics and Elections, although I think it was written by counsel at the time, basically demanded that she take these things out because they weren't true. Well, in fact, they were true, but they threatened her with disqualification if she didn't. And so they made her, mail out retractions to all the folks that she had mailed her original flyer to. So, I mean, again, this is not the first time that a candidate's statements intended to inform and influence the electorate have been challenged without recourse. And so that's what happened with Dan. He sent this out and said, well, here's what E&E asked for. Here's why I think it's still valid. And I think there was one particular item about the CEO salary. He'd gotten the number from several directors, but it turns out the number was lower. And he sent out to the members, I've been informed it's 315, not 350. And if that is in fact correct, I'll change it. But the fact that he didn't send out the retractions within 24 hours to all the things, whether they were accurate or inaccurate, they concluded he was disqualified. So that in summary is my understanding what happened in each of those cases.
I've got a question.
Butch, go ahead.
Who is the one that puts the E&E committee together?
The Ethics and Elections Committee, like every standing committee of the league board, is appointed by the president, who is Rick Roderick, K5UR.
Shouldn't the members have a say in who's on those committees?
Well, we talked earlier about the suggestion that being considered to take that out of the board's hands and put it into a third party, kind of a neutral third party body. And I don't think that, the members ordinarily wouldn't, members don't pick members of committees other than, if the director has an advisory committee, like the contest advisory committee or the DX advisory committee, or the emergency communication advisory committee, the director will reach out to members to participate in that. But those are not decision makers. They are advisors, and they produce their reports and study issues either that they come up with or the board comes up with, and they report back up, and then the board takes those under consideration. But committees that have authority, that authority has to come, from the board. And in this case, that authority comes from the folks appointed by the president, who, by the way, is elected by the entire board.
So basically what you're telling me is whoever's sitting in president could have any control of what he wants in where.
Well, he can control who sits on the committee. And there may be some influence based on who you pick to go on that committee. But I know, Fred himself, Fred K1VR, at one time he was sitting on the Ethics and Elections Committee. So, they try and move it around, but again, it's a board committee that has the ability to make some initial decisions subject to the board, overruling them. And that is really not something the members directly can or probably should be doing.
Question, if he's done. KD7I.
Paul, go ahead.
I tuned in about 6:30, so I may have missed the beginning. My membership is in Oregon. Several people have been disqualified. Do I still go in and vote? Is there still stuff to vote on, or no?
No. This was a one choice election. It was just for director position. And you may notice that on the ARRL website, very shortly after they issued the disqualification notice to Dan, they put a item out on the ARRL website saying basically that the incumbent has been declared elected. They did the same thing in the case of Jim N3JT in the Roanoke division. And some of us find that a little surprising because there is an appeal process and an appeal period. And for them to basically say, okay, it's done, and they publish it before that appeal has had a chance to be considered, seems to me kind of jumping the gun. But that's my opinion. Yes, Fred.
This is Fred W5BN.
Go ahead, Fred.
I've been a member of the ARRL for forever, seems like. And I've never received a vote. Since my good friend and neighbor was running, I went through the agony of 2 hours of phone calls and everything, but finally got my vote made electronically. But I never received an election in all my years.
Check with the membership desk to make sure they have your contact information correct. Now, I'm not in a division where they're doing the voting now, but everybody should have received a U.S. postal mail delivered ballot with candidate statements and directions for voting either electronically or by return mail.
Negative.
And were you getting your QST magazine up until the cutoff?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and have you moved or changed your division from one time to another?
Oh, sure. I was in Coronado for 25 years before I moved back here to New York.
Okay.
And I've been here for about 12, 13 years.
Okay.
Marty, here in Hudson, electronic voting started a week ago, and we were pre-notified by the company doing the tabulation. I haven't received a paper ballot yet. If that in fact happens, I don't know if that would it happen if you've already done electronic voting.
I don't know. There's enough lead time on sending ballots out that I would expect they would send them to everybody. I don't think voting early and electronically normally would stop that mailing process because it's already underway. But I'm not on the inside on that one, so I don't know. Now,
Okay.
You remember back about 7 or 8 years ago, more than that now, they tried electronic voting, only voting, and it was a disaster. The typical 30-some% of voters went down to like 15 or 14%. I don't think that electronic voting was implemented well at all. But now I guess it's hybrid. But so if you have not received your paper ballot yet, Fred, that may be why you haven't gotten yours. But for past elections, well, there haven't been elections, as John pointed out, for the last
6 years.
6 years. So there was no ballot to get.
Okay.
So you'd have to go back to 2000, fall of 2017 would have been the last time you, as a Hudson Division member, would have gotten a ballot.
2018.
Yeah.
18.
Is this- Just one question, Fred, is this the same Fred from Bernardsville, New Jersey?
You got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Rhea?
Yeah. I have a little bit of insight into the election process because when I was the director of ARRL, I actually went and toured the company, and it is hybrid. They are actually, the funny thing is they're actually associated with Frank Laudenberg, who's actually former CEO of the company I work at, and they have a very robust operation. They do have hybrid printed and mailed ballots. The previous attempt at electronic balloting was very poor and mediocre, in my opinion. It was where you would get an email and then you fill out a Word document and email it back. This one's a website, kind of like how you do if you're into stock trading, how you do proxy voting, right? So it's very robust, and they do have a paper process. The intent was, I believe, with the ARRL was to try email first, and if email doesn't work, if people don't opt into email, then they could then proceed with paper. And then eventually they want to phase out as many people as possible from paper and into electronic because it just costs less to mail.
Sure. Thank you, Ria. That's good to know. And a reminder that even if you haven't gotten your ballot yet and you aren't voting electronically, the deadline is like the third Friday of November. So there's a fair amount of time for you to make sure you get that ballot if you haven't received it in the next week or two, and get it back in. Bob, do you have your hands up? K6TKZ? You'll have to unmute.
Deadline is November 15th at noon.
Oh, you don't. I'm sorry.
In Newington, Connecticut.
November 15th.
Yeah,
okay.
my comment is that, first of all, thank you for putting it together. I wish we had contested elections more. I've never seen a paper ballot in 60 years. I think it's unfortunate, and I guess it's in the bylaws of the directors. I don't know Dan, but I think it's unfortunate anytime an organization, and I serve on boards of nonprofits, where they have the power to eliminate any candidate running for any position for any reason, short of being in jail, I guess. This disturbs me greatly about the organization at this point, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll agree with them too, because it's made me very weary if I want to stay a member of the ARRL. And I'll just leave it at that, and I'll be quiet. This is
thanks, Butch.
K87 RMB on Idaho.
Thank you, Butch. All right. With that, I think we're almost 7:40. So shall we go ahead and wrap it? Keep an eye out on the programs for RATPAC, because we may have follow-up sessions related to this sort of thing. We have other speakers in the pipeline for the next several weeks, but we're always looking for additional material, and we may decide to go ahead and add a session covering some of this in more depth in the future. So please keep an eye out for that. And Dan, anything else you want to say before we finish up?
No, you guys done a great job tonight. I appreciate everybody that put the questions in and participated. We haven't had the crowd I thought we were going to have, but I think on YouTube, with the YouTube video we sent out afterwards, we'll see the differences there.
Very good. Thank you all again. We appreciate your taking the time, and we know you care about the league enough to sit here and spend an evening with us. So 7-3 all, and take care.